Are you guys gay?
Yeah.
No.
All right. Do you guys think that it's wrong or right to be gay?
I think it's right. It's okay to be gay.
I think it's right to be gay.
Yeah.
It's okay, it's right to be gay?
Yeah.
Well, under moral philosophical ethics, there are a few questions about it, specifically under what we call the divine command theory. But let's back up first and let's talk about what an argument is. So, when we think about moral issues, we have to ask two questions. Why think that, and what do you mean? What do we think that why think that means?
Why think that? I think it means that you ask a person why they should think that way.
Or,
Yeah.
Like what's the
Explain
explain this like evidence as to why they're like why their opinion is on that.
And what do you think what do you mean means?
Just explain yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's both kind of ask the same question, but that is about the conclusion, why is about the premise, and then what do you mean means that we need to understand the claim so that way we can actually try and figure out what the solution of the problem is, right? Okay. Which is where we get arguments from. Arguments are conclusions supported by premises, or they could be premises that support a conclusion. So we have a few different types of arguments, but we're going to choose one called a simple syllogism, right?
Okay.
It follows this pattern. An A is an X, right? Mm-hmm. All X's are Y, therefore all Y's are what? A, exactly. Or therefore an A is a Y, however you want to say it, right? Now, when we talk about it, and when we talk about arguments, we put them in something called logically valid forms, or to make them logically valid arguments, which is where an argument, if the premises are true, then the conclusion also needs to be true, right?
Okay.
So let's put it all together. Strawberries have seeds is the first premise.
Yeah.
All things with seeds are fruits.
Yeah.
Therefore, strawberries are fruits.
Oh yeah, I've done this before. We did this in science, I think.
Really, you did this in science?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah, I've done this.
because it's a formula basically. So is the first premise true? Do strawberries have seeds?
Yes.
That is correct. Are all things with seeds considered fruits though?
No, because like
Because
tomatoes
cucumbers
are
have seeds.
Cucumbers, tomatoes, things like that,
Well,
and
tomatoes are
it's a lot of debate on whether or not those are actually fruits or
Yeah.
not, right? So that means that our premise, therefore strawberries are fruits, is what?
like inaccurate. Yeah.
It's incorrect, yes, because if the second premise saying that all things with seeds are fruits is possibly not true because we have things like tomato, cucumber, things like that where we don't know if they are fruits, then that means that strawberries are not fruits just because they have seeds.
Yeah.
Does that pattern make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's talk about homosexuality.
Yeah.
Hey!
Okay, so we have something called divine command theory, right? Divine command theory is basically saying that talks about whether or not God finds it permissible to do something, whether because God says so, or is it wrong or right? Right. We don't really use the word right. We use the word permissible. But,
Yeah.
or is it wrong or is it right to do an action because God says so, or does God tell us to not or to do an action because it's wrong? You know, is it wrong because God says so, or is God tell us to do it because it's wrong? Basically, right? So we have a lot of moral questions about homosexuality, right?
Yeah.
People often say that it is not right because it is only focused on sex, and sex between two people of the same sex is hypothetically not permissible. It is wrong per se, right?
Yeah.
This is what generates a lot of falsehoods because we use a lot of the language that says that it is wrong or it is right to do these things when it's just false, right?
Yeah.
We know that homosexuality makes people happy. It celebrates a lot of norms that heteronormative people do, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't cause any difference between anybody, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people say that homosexuality is wrong because the Bible condemns it. So let's get into 5 arguments about it, right?
Yeah.
These are all going to be in the simple syllogism format. So, 1, the Bible says homosexuality is wrong. All actions considered sins in the Bible are wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. Number 2, homosexuality used to be illegal. Any action that has ever been illegal is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. 3, homosexuality is not natural. Anything unnatural is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. 4, homosexuality stops procreation. Anything that stops procreation is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. And then finally, in homosexuality, the parts do not fit. Any place where the parts do not fit and anything that is not penis to vagina sex is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. So let's work backwards. So, or actually, let's start from the first one, right?
Okay.
They say that we have the first premise. The Bible says homosexuality is wrong. All actions considered sins in the Bible are wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. Let's start with the first premise. Is that premise true or right? The Bible says homosexualty is wrong. Does the Bible say that?
It says it in some versions of it.
Some versions allude to it. So we can maybe say that that is correct, right?
Yeah.
Some versions, some transcriptions of the text allude to it. Translations, yes. So, all actions considered sins in the Bible are wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. Now, when we have that second claim, right?
Yeah.
If we're following what the Bible says, I'm pretty sure at some point the Bible also says that things such as slavery was allowed because they had a lot of slaves to either help them with food or to do their bidding, right?
Yeah.
So if this premise is true, then that also makes slavery legal. Now, is slavery something that's morally permissible?
No.
Not at all.
Slavery.
Because it's slavery. You're forcing someone to do something against their own will. They don't want to do it. You're just using them as a means to their own ends in whatever production that you're trying to do, right? So this argument is what we call unsound because to have a sound argument, logically valid arguments with true premises have to have true conclusions. Here, we do not have a true premise, which means that we do not have a true conclusion because of the examples that we have found. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do number 2. Homosexuality used to be illegal. Any action that has ever been illegal is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. Do we think that that is a sound argument or an unsound argument?
That is an unsound argument.
Unsound argument. We just gave an example about this, but what are some things that used to be legal?
Weed.
Sure, we can look to slavery. We can look to certain forms of drugs and things like that because now a lot of drugs are legal, but there is that's another conversation.
The gray ground, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Slavery also used to be legal, but now it is illegal because it is not permissible to force someone to do your own bidding and things of the nature, right?
Yeah.
The law is not always correct. So this is an unsound argument. Very good, guys. 3, homosexuality is not natural. Anything unnatural is wrong. Therefore, homosexuality is wrong. Does that sound like a sound argument or an unsound argument?
That's an unsound argument because we eat a lot of stuff that's like that was grown to fit us as humans, and that's unnatural. Like bananas have been grown years after years and been inbred to become eatable for humans. So that's unnatural, but we still eat bananas.
Of course, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of foods such as bananas. We have a lot of industrial foods such as, burgers and things like that, right? Like that, those aren't natural. So if those are unnatural and fast food is unnatural, then it just makes this argument unsound. 4, I believe I said it is, homosexuality stops procreation. All actions that stop procreation are wrong. Does that sound unsound or sound?
I guess it's kind of sound.
You think why do you think it's sound?
Because I don't know.
So anything that stops procreation is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That part doesn't sound.
It's not sound?
Yeah.
That is correct. Give me some examples of some things that stop procreation.
Birth control.
Abortions, birth control, very good. Give me 2 more. There are two very big ones that we're missing. Condoms is one of them.
And then can't think of the second one.
It's akin to birth control, but vasectomies. When men get vasectomies, right? Like that is something that stops procreation. So if that is unsound, then that also means that, if all procreation stopping things are unsound, then that would destroy the argument of homosexuality stopping procreation, because it's not just homosexuality that stops it. It's also many man-made objects that we have that can do it. Now, finally, for the parts don't fit argument, where all non-penis to vagina sex is wrong. Is that sound or unsound?
Unsound. unsound.
It is just unsound because it is what people do with their bodies.
Yeah, I
we
don't
don't get to regulate that in certain ways, right?
I don't like to think about it.
Right. We don't. Why should we even be concerned with what happens in other people's bodies? But the second premise, all non-penis to vagina sex is wrong. Do we think that that is unsound or sound?
Say it again?
All non-penis to vagina sex is wrong. Do we think that that is sound or unsound?
Unsound.
Why do we think that that is unsound?
Because there are just different types of sex that people like people use that all the time.
Right. But there are different things that people do. There are different forms of oral and anal sex that people go through that would hypothetically make those things non-permissible, right? Because if it's only penis to vagina sex, then there are other things that people do that would become unpermissible, and then they would become wrong, making this argument wrong. Very good. So what we're going to do now at 11 minutes in, we are going to think of 3 different things, kind of going against the divine command theory idea of homosexuality, and we're going to talk about why homosexuality might be right. We're going to come up with 3 reasons, okay? So let's start with it is legal, okay?
Yeah.
So we said if homosexuality is legal, then what?
It's fine.
Yes.
Sorry.
So let's try and put it in the simple syllogism form. Remember, if an A is an X and all X's are Y's, then that means that A is an X, A is Y, right?
Yeah.
So it is homosexuality is legal. Let's say all actions that are legal are right. Therefore, homosexuality is right. Now, is that sound or unsound?
Sound.
We think that's sound?
I feel like it's still.
It is still unsound, and it is still unsound because there are many actions that are legal or have been legal in the past that are not permissible, i.e. slavery, right? Like, that's honestly a big example that you can always come back to. Like, well, did slavery happen? Is slavery right? You know, something like that. Next up, homosexuality is not chosen. All actions that are not chosen are correct. Therefore, homosexuality is right. What do we think about that?
That's unsound. People
That's
can be born into like an oligarchy.
People can be born into an oligarchy. What were you saying, Abby?
Slavery again.
Slavery, yeah, okay, yeah. You know, you cannot be you can be born into slavery and things like that. So, just because you're born into something does not necessarily make it right. And then finally, let's go with one last one. It makes people happy. All actions that make people happy are right.
No.
Unsound.
What are something? Drugs,
Like
Guns.
murder, right? Like things of that nature are all things that can put a smile on someone's face, but doesn't necessarily make them right. So, from this conversation, do we think that God and the Bible itself are always correct?
no.
Why do we think that?
Because a lot of what stuff that the Bible says is outdated, or it doesn't really think about how other people would feel about stuff.
Right, it can often be very self-serving because you can be like, my God told me to do this, so I'm going to act in this sort of way.
Not to mention the different translations of the Bible have a lot of differences between gender. Like, for some examples of, I think, the Quran, some of them have more feminine reading texts about religion and stuff, but the translations are usually done by men who instead make it about like femininity is right and stuff.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people will use it to convince other people of their own beliefs. It often lacks the motivation or the understanding of other people's motives, and it becomes very self-serving. So that is not only divine command theory, but that is also an introduction to arguments, simple syllogisms, logically valid arguments, sound arguments, and then also the argumentations of whether or not homosexuality is wrong or permissible. Thank you, guys.
Yay!